The Ghanaian Member of Parliament who pioneered the drafting of the recent anti-LGBT bill that was passed in Ghana Parliament, Sam George, has replied to the US government after threatening Ghana with sanctions in case the bill is signed into law. Let's watch this video. I will be back.
I'd expect Miller to respect the tenets of democracy, and the entire United States government needs to bear in mind that Ghana is a sovereign country. We are opposed to cultural imperialism. Just 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Department of State, when called upon to intervene in Israel, the Israeli campaign in Gaza Strip, said that it was not the position of the U.S. Department of State to intervene in the local matters of sovereign states. Ghana is not the 51st state of the United States. Ghana is a sovereign state on its own. The sovereign parliament of Ghana has passed a bill, and I think that Matthew Miller should be more interested in the loss of life of Americans' children in American schools to gun violence.
Are there concerns,
He knows where it matters and not where it doesn't matter. They're not invited in Ghana's local politics where our parliament has passed the law.
Flowing from, this question my colleague has asked, are there concerns about how this might affect relations between Ghana and America? Also, are there concerns about pushbacks, not just pushbacks, but seeing exactly how, Uganda was treated in some measure after they had passed the bill? Are there concerns that Ghana might face that same treatment?
Well, Ghana is a proud African nation, first country in the sub-Saharan Africa to gain independence and lead the light for the rest of Africa. I expect the leaders of our country, the president of our country, to stand shoulder high and tell the American people, you either do business with us on our terms or you can walk. American businesses that operate in Ghana are not in Ghana because of LGBTQ. They are in Ghana because they make a profit. If you're an American business working in Ghana, you turn $100 million in profit every year. If you think that because we are protecting our cultural values and saying no to LGBTQ, you want to lose $100 million in profit, pack up and go. Another company will come into Ghana and do business. Ghana is a fertile ground for business. Look, Africa must begin to assert our rights. We're not puppets and stooges of the West. Look at Uganda. Uganda's economy is not as big as Ghana's economy. But per the Economist Intelligence Unit, the EIU, the 2024 report, Uganda is going to have the 6th fastest growing economy in Africa in 2024. And it's just the sheer hypocrisy of America and the West. Doing business with Saudi Arabia and doing business with Qatar. Qatar spent $22 billion hosting the World Cup in 2022. 18 billion out of those 22 billion went to American and Western businesses. Qatar buys over $1 billion of military hardware every year from America. The punishment for homosexuality in Qatar is death. Nigeria passed a same-sex marriage bill as far back as 2015. In fact, your bill is more punitive than Ghana's bill. In Nigeria, the punishment in your law for same-sex marriage is 14 years imprisonment. The maximum in Ghana's law is just 3 years. Has Nigeria's economy collapsed? Has Uganda's economy collapsed? We need to begin to stand. The American economy would not run and the Western economies would not run without African raw material. I think it's time we begin to look at adding value to our own raw material. Why should Ghanaian cocoa and Nigerian cocoa be traded on the New York Stock Exchange and not on the Ghanaian Stock Exchange and Nigerian Stock Exchange? If we begin to assert ourselves, these guys will know that they have to deal with us on equal terms. They're not doing us a favor. We're doing them a favor. The best doctors in the United States medical system are Ghanaians and Nigerians. The best economists on Wall Street are Ghanaians and Nigerians. They're not better than us. We sit in the same classroom with them and beat them every day. Academically, intellectually, we're better than them. But it's simply because we've not asserted our rights as Africans, because we want to go for cheap hand-me-downs. And I keep repeating, the IMF and the World Bank are banks. Banks operate by giving loans and making profit of the interest of those loans. So they should not threaten us. I mean, a bank should not be threatening the customer and saying, I won't give you a loan if you don't do what I want. If I don't come to you for a loan, you don't turn a profit. And so our economies are what run those multinational banks. And until we begin to assert ourselves and begin to trade more amongst ourselves, Ghana should begin to buy more rice from Nigeria, and Nigeria should begin to buy more salt from Ghana. We don't need to be going to the West for this. That's our problem as Africa.
Okay, Honorable Sam George, talk to us about why it was important for you to champion this cause and for this bill to be passed. And I ask this because we hear a number of people who would say, and same thing was said here in Nigeria as well, that there are other challenges that our countries have faced. And why is it important that the rights of people who are, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and more, and why is it that these LGBTQ plus people are the priority as opposed to all the other issues bedeviling the nation?
Well, Parliament is considering a lot of several other bills that we are doing, and we'll deal with everything. But let's bear in mind, the people who lose their identity have lost their nation. The European and American communities and society have failed because they've redefined family. They've lost the sense of what it means to be family. And that's what they want. It's that kind of mental aberration and mental disorder that they want to import into our countries. You cannot continue to deal with cultural imperialism and say that it is a secondary matter. Our identity as Ghanaians is a principal matter for us. And that's why we've pushed this bill. Because look, the Ghana AIDS Commission in 2021 spent $200 million buying antiretroviral drugs to take care of HIV/AIDS for people who chose to have sex, men who chose to have sex with men. And so the government had to spend $200 million. Now, do you know how many school buildings in my constituency $200 million would have built? Or how many hospital beds that would have created? And so when somebody says that it is not a pressing issue, it's because they don't understand the full effect of homosexuality on society. We're dealing with getting enough beds for our women to give birth when they are pregnant. And we should now begin to divert those resources to stitch up the backsides of men who have chosen to go and have sex with men when they begin to have anal tears and anal warts. I mean, why should we be spending resources on that? We should be channeling the resources into areas that we need. Go and check the American system and see how many people are committing suicide because of the effect of homosexuality. The CDC says that homosexuals are 400% more likely to be suicidal. Do you know the effect of suicide on the GDP of a country? Do you know the fact that the young man who walked into a school in the United States 3 months ago and shot up 22 kids was transgender? And this all came from a mental disorder because of him having undergone a gender change or gender reassignment when he was 8 years old? I mean, is this what we want to bring into our society? I grew up in Nigeria, and I knew, and growing up in Nigeria, I could walk to my neighbor's house and have a meal with them. My parents weren't scared when I attended Command Day Secondary School in Oshodi at Nafrik Barracks. They knew I was going to go to school and come back. They weren't afraid that their son was going to get killed by a child who has been affected mentally because he's transgendered. And kids in my constituency in Ghana today go to school, play on the way back home, and their parents are safe. Their parents are able to contribute to Ghana's economic development because they know their children are safe. We're not going to, just look, even on the African continent, which country has the highest crime rate? South Africa. Why? Because they've embraced homosexuality as one of the growing factors in that country. Look at every country that has embraced this and look at what has happened to their crime rate. This has ripple effects on society as a whole. We're not going to import the sickness and troubles of another country. We've got enough on our hands in Ghana and in Africa.
All right. Let's look at the role of media influencers, social media influencers. They've also been at the forefront, beating the drum for supporting the LGBTQ plus community. Does this law in any way touch on the freedom to canvass for the community, either on social media space, as we've seen, that's quite proliferating. It's everywhere. We see it in acting, we see it in glamoring and so on, even in mansions and so on. Does this law touch on any aspect of that for influencers in Ghana?
Absolutely. We've gone after all technological and media platforms and said that you cannot use technological and media platforms to propagate stuff that is illegal in Ghana. So companies like DSTV, for example, will have to be careful about the kind of movies that they show in Ghana. And Ghana is not going to be the first country where they do that. We're not going to be the first country where we're going to say the kind of content you show on TV must be censored because this is not allowed. in every other country where they choose to protect their cultural values, there are things you cannot show. And for social media influencers, you cannot be a social media influencer and creating content that is contrary to the laws of the land. For example, Ghana has anti-money laundering laws. We have anti-terrorism laws and anti-vigilantism laws. You can't be a content producer right now and say that because you're a content producer or a social media influencer, you're producing content that promotes money laundering. The law would deal with you. So if we've passed the legislation that prohibits LGBTQ advocacy, and in fact, if you look at our bill, the punishment for advocacy is the strictest punishment in the bill. The punishment for advocacy is higher than the punishment for the act itself, because we want to protect the innocence of our children. And so everybody's going to be compelled to comply with the law. You either comply with it or you leave.
Are there fears that this might in some way increase some form of discrimination or extrajudicial treatment for people who are living or who are LGBTQ plus? And I ask this because sometimes there isn't a surefire way to determine who a person is just by looking at them. And there have been people who are, for men who are effeminate or women who are more masculine. And some would argue that this might make them become targets or have targets at their back. So is this a concern that Ghanaians should be worried about?
Well, for the first time in Ghana, we have a legislation that protects the fundamental human rights to a fair trial of persons living with LGBTQ. I'm not going to run and play the ostrich and say I haven't seen instances where persons have been assaulted in an extrajudicial manner because of accusations or allegations of them being members of the LGBTQ community. But when you read this legislation, we actually impose, I think in section 18 or 19, we actually impose a punishment of up to 3 years on anybody who carries out extrajudicial treatment. So if you suspect somebody is guilty of falling foul of the law, the person must have their day in court, in a competent court of jurisdiction with a lawyer of their own choosing. You cannot on your own decide that you're going to beat the person or lynch the person. If you do that, you will go to jail. And that's what this law does. So this law is a very balanced law that seeks to protect the fundamental human rights of persons, all manner of persons, because strict proof must happen in a court of law. And let me state this fact for emphasis. We are governed by the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. That is what gives us law in Ghana, our 1992 Constitution. The 1992 Constitution gives everybody rights, but your rights are not absolute, including even the right to life. That's why the government of Ghana, through the courts, can curtail your life by sentencing you to death if your actions are inimical to public health, public safety, and public morality. These are the 3 grounds in our Constitution on which your fundamental rights can be curtailed, including your right to life. So if we're talking about public health, public morality, and public security, I've told you what the effect of LGBTQ is on public health and public health delivery, as well as public morality. And so the framers of our Constitution were very concerned about the morality of our country and the moral fiber of our country. If you read Article 39 of our Constitution, it actually imposes a duty on the state to ensure that the proper moral fiber or proper social, cultural norms are integrated into the moral fiber of the state. And so people have a fundamental right to a fair trial in a court. So if you're a member of if you choose to be a member of the LGBTQ community and carry out an illegal activity, one thing I can guarantee you is that you're entitled to a fair trial in a court of law. Your right to practice homosexuality is not a fundamental right. It's not a human right. There is no right in Ghana's Constitution, and I'm yet to see any right in any international legislation that confers a right on people because of their sexual preference or gender identity. There is no international law as we speak today, including the UN Declaration on Human Rights, that gives a right on the basis of your sexual preference. But let me be clear on one last thing. As framers of this bill, we're not interested in what anybody does in the confines of their bedroom. I got woken up this morning by a call from your producer. I was in my bedroom, respectfully lying by my wife. Nobody's asked me what I did with my wife, and it's nobody's business what happens between me and my wife in my bedroom. But when you decide as an individual to bring what is supposed to remain in the privacy of your bedroom into public space and begin to advocate for your personal proclivity, then public policy will apply to you. And so nobody's going into anybody's bedroom. But when you decide to bring what ought to stay in your bedroom into the public space, then we'll have a public conversation about it.
All right. I'm sure I wish we had more time so we can talk more on this. Of course, the impact on children. We're also aware that you talked about how it affects children and so on. But hopefully, we'll get to bring you back and we'll find out once the president puts his pen to paper. And that will be a good time to have you join us again. And
will that happen before the elections? Do you see that happening before the elections?
Yes, per our constitution, within 7 days since after we passed the bill, and we passed the bill 2 days ago, it has to be transmitted from Parliament to the office of the president. The president has 7 to 14 days to assent to the bill for it to become law. If he chooses not to assent to it, he has to write back to Parliament within 7 to 14 days, stating why he is refusing to assent to it. And then as sponsors of the bill, we have multiple options available to us. We can decide to use public pressure to compel the president to rescind his decision. Or my favorite position is to bring the bill back to Parliament for a public vote, an open public vote per the standing orders of Parliament. If I'm able to get 2/3 of the members of Parliament to vote in favor of my bill, the president can keep his green pen. It will become a law. Without the president's signature, it becomes law if I can get 2/3. I'm confident that we'll get 2/3 because when we had the vote in Parliament, there was not a single vote on the record against this bill. And I'm confident that 275 members in Ghana's Parliament, I will get more than 2/3 to support my bill. And I mean, the various authorities, the National House of Chiefs, have indicated their willingness to stand with us and compel the president to sign this bill. The Ghana Christian Council and Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Churches Council, the National Chief Imam's Office, and the Council of Traditional Worshippers have all stated their desire for the president to sign this bill. The president must remember that he holds power and trust for the Ghanaian. And when people say it's an election year, I wonder why that's a problem. The president is still bringing us loan agreements in an election year. We are signing them for him. So there should be no problem in an election year for him to sign something to protect our cultural values.
Honorable Sam George, there are many angles to this conversation that I would love to take, but hopefully we can have you again and you grant us another interview so we can delve further into the details of this bill.
Anytime.
Thank you very much for your time.
As I said last time that I'm not going to make any comment on this particular subject or topic until the president decides to sign or not to sign. That is where we are going to know the type of politics we are playing in Ghana. Let's see how it goes. Please, you can join our Telegram group by going through our description box and click on the Telegram link you see in the description box. It will take you straight to our Telegram platform, which is on Cat Africa Live. Join us as we discuss about the well-being of Africa. And if today is your first time visiting my channel, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification button so that anytime I upload any great content, you will be notified. Thanks for watching.